conversation started last Sunday night when we were looking at the futures, and we thought we better get the group together. So Sunday night, I'm sure you didn't want to hear from me, but we got together, and it's been really interesting week. And if you would have left the planet and went to Mars and said, what do you think happened this week, and where we started and where we ended, and think about that, folks. Where do you think this ended up? We're positive for the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. If you look back, the Friday to Friday move, we actually are up. Now, it was quite a roller coaster. And if you've ridden a roller coaster, you know that you usually start and stop at the same place, hopefully. But it is quite the ride as far as with all the ups and downs and all the loops. And that's really what this last week gave us, were a lot of these turns, these ups and these downs. And so we can probably go through it, almost like chronicle this day by day.
Yeah, well, Monday was an interesting day because, of course, it was fake news, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that the market rallied intraday, it was down, right? And that was the futures that we saw as we went in. And then it flipped around and rallied. And then the White House had to walk it back and say, fake news. We didn't say there was a pause, but guess what? There was a pause.
That's right. Well, the thing that probably really got President Trump's attention was when Treasury Secretary Bessent pointed out to him as far as what was going on in the market. It wasn't just the stock market declining, but it was those Treasury yields. They began moving up as well. And we know with $36 trillion in debt, that makes a difference if you're at 3.8%, 3.9%, or 4.25% on the 10-year Treasury. That, I think, really got his attention.
I agree with that. So Monday, we had an even day. Tuesday down significantly, right? And then Wednesday, he had just two people in the room with him, and it was not Elon Musk and Peter Navarro, right? It was, as you said, Howard Lutnick and
Treasury Secretary Bessent.
And Treasury Secretary Bessent. Those were the two that were in the room, and they said the bond vigilantes are looking at this thing, and interest rates are going up. Could be for a number of reasons. Number one, it could be not just people here were selling it, but around the world. It wasn't, the asset that people want to own. So people were selling that around the world. Some said it was the hedge funds that were getting calls. But either way, it got his attention, and that's when the 90-day pause came.
That's right. So in the middle of the day, the announcement of the 90-day pause, all of a sudden we saw a massive rally in the market, and it wasn't just a few stocks.
One of the biggest we've ever seen in our careers.
That's right. Absolutely. Across whether it was large cap stocks, small cap, technology, value, growth, it really helped sentiment overall. And I think that what it did was it caught a lot of people on Wall Street off guard because they didn't seem to be contemplating that President Trump could be using tariffs as a negotiating tool. It's almost as though they were taking him at his word, which, I can understand, but he's not going to show all his whole hand.
It caught everybody by surprise. And in fact, there was a call from Wall Street just minutes before that 90-day pause came.
Yeah, so there was a publication that came out where just before it came out that they said that there was going to be a recession. They basically put it as a certainty that we were going into a recession. And if you think about what the market was pricing in, just historically, when we've seen these 20% or worse declines, and we were close, we didn't get to 20%.
19.
Yep, that is basically almost like the certainty of a recession. And so Wall Street was reacting to that. They said, okay, well, we're going to get a recession. Well, all of a sudden you get the pause. They had to retract that statement.
But not just I think it was J.P. Morgan, but it was everybody had to walk back the percentage that we were going to go into a recession. You and I talked offline. It was about a 50%, just a flip of a coin. But they were saying it was almost a certainty. They had to walk that all back. And then we, as you point out, Trump is negotiating, and we found out that it isn't the rest of the world that he's concerned about, but China.
Yes, so you have the 10% baseline tariffs on everybody. So he removed those much higher reciprocal tariffs, at least for now. That's been on pause to negotiate that.
That could change by a tweet.
It could.
From 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue as we're recording.
Well, absolutely. And that's one of the problems I think that the market is going to have to struggle with is do the facts change in real time, and how do you react to that? And probably just a matter of let's just see how it does play out, right? I mean, kind of trust that there is a process here. There is the old saying, a method to the madness as far as the negotiations. But what we learned is that all of a sudden you get 145% tariffs on China. Everybody else's go down. So the math works out where the weighted average tariff, so if you look at every country we trade with, it actually increased as a result of the pause, but it was focused and concentrated on China. And I think that's been a long-standing thing that he's talked about, is the need to rebalance that trade, to have fairer trade. You have intellectual property rights issues. There's also a report that came out that, remember earlier last year where we had those infrastructure hacks, as far as there are some pipelines that got hacked. Well, there was a report that came out that implicated actually the Chinese government.
Well, I think
behind
they almost said as much.
Yeah. They did
late in the week,
but
right?
it's like you get more evidence, and it's like, okay, you guys really need to stop this.
Right. And I think what the takeaway is, if you're listening to this, is how the heck do you invest in this market? Number one, and number two, what should we think about it? It just goes back to the core tenets of what we do in our portfolio management, right? First, we set up with what is your tolerance for risk, and we stress test that. Then we build a portfolio and say, whatever, pick a number, 60, 40, 70, 30. That other piece of that is the ballast. And it's also a bucket to go get money when stocks are on sale. So all of the core tenets that we have been doing for decades came into play this week, and that is really the best takeaway.